Today is Tuesday, August the 30th. It is my 25th wedding anniversary today. I know you think I'm very young, but yes, I've been child bride. And also, my middle child is on an airplane right now, headed off to college. So it's a very emotional day for our family. But it is also a very exciting day for Multnomah County. And this is your Multnomah County Board of Commissioners and our board briefing. It's a very exciting day because we have celebrities in the house. Yes, we do. And we have the library here to talk to us about from books to beats, how the library promotes literacy through music. So very, very excited to see all of you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Kafori. Good morning, everyone. It's really, not that it's not always exciting to be here, but especially exciting to be here today, partly because of all of our celebrities here with us today, but also just because this program is going to highlight something that I think is really, really demonstrative of where the library is having impact and the potential for impact in the future, especially as we create these fabulous new spaces that we have. So I have the pleasure today of being joined by Jody Redifer.
Of introducing yourself?
I thought I did, didn't I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Apologies. That's how excited I am. I am Vayli Elke, Director of Libraries. Thank you. I have the pleasure today of being joined by Jody Redifer, who's right behind me. You'll be hearing from him in a moment. He's a program specialist for the library, who's also part of the library's Black Cultural Library Advocate team, and some additional guests who will be introducing themselves later. As the chair mentioned, today you'll hear about some of the work the library is doing to serve youth in a detention setting, but also the impact on one of the people who has participated in this program. You'll hear from a partner in education and a visionary who's taken her art to a level of wide acclaim, and you'll see how all of those pieces together create something special and lasting, and importantly, just to be clear, something we hope to make possible with our new library spaces. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So you all know that libraries are places where people come to visit to access books and other resources, to get help, and to be in a safe and welcoming space. I'm really grateful that you are each also very aware, with years of training, that libraries are much, much more. Thanks to ongoing partnerships with the Department of Community Justice and MCSO, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, in detention settings, and with others well beyond that, the library is expanding its reach every single day. Jody's work that you're going to hear about personifies what libraries can do and be in service to their communities for people who face the greatest barriers and challenges in life. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to him so you can hear about his work from him directly. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Vayli, and good day, members of the board.
Morning.
My name is Jody Redifer, and I work for the library as a Black Cultural Library Advocate Program Specialist. And I currently provide library outreach services to youth throughout Multnomah County, and specifically to those who are incarcerated at the Donald E. Long Juvenile Detention Center, which houses pre-adjudicated youth. I choose to do this work because I was just as involved as a youth and young adult, and I know that everyone is a work in progress, and everyone has a capacity to make different decisions and take different actions for better or worse. We as humans are never the same person as we were the day before. So before we dive in, I'd like to stop for a second and so we can consider all of the ways in which music shows up in our lives. Let's think about how it influences our lives and accents certain milestones in a lifetime, like a wedding or anniversary, perhaps. We're surrounded by music. You'll find it bringing folks together at social functions across cultures, and it can also speak to us on an individual level. Music is also integral to religious and spiritual practices throughout the world. We use it as a way to learn our ABCs and as a form of protest. And this is just a small example. I think it would be reasonable for me to assume that everyone in this room has had at least one musical experience that has had a lasting impact on their life. Today we're going to talk about how music is changing the lives of youth around Multnomah County, and particularly those facing barriers. All right, so when I began working at Dolly Long, which was about 3 years ago, the position was newly created, and it was created because the Multnomah County Library identified critical needs for services there. And what I knew about the place was that it had a functioning library that we kept stocked with books, and I also knew that black and brown youth are extremely overrepresented at the facility, and that the youth probably didn't choose the circumstances that landed them there. So the population is always in flux at Dolly Long, but it's not out of the ordinary to walk onto a unit and see about 60 to 75% black kids, 15 to 30% Latinx, and 5 to 20% white kids. It does vary from week to week, though. It depends. There's a lot of movement there. And when you spend a little time there, it doesn't take a whole lot to see that there are plenty of ways to contribute services that can be provided in a meaningful way. So to begin with, the library itself at Dolly Long, which you can see in the slide, is actually pretty nice, especially when you compare it to detention facilities across the U.S. Like, we have it pretty good here. There's about 8,000 books throughout the facility, and you can find the books on the units and in the library and in the kids' rooms. I try to select with an equitable lens to the population, but what I've found is that the kids are the best selectors for their library. So, and a quick example of that is I had a kid come to me and say, I haven't read a book since the 4th grade, but my buddy turned me on to this K-Wan book, and it's great. Do you have any more K-Wan books? And we happen to have a lot of K-Wan books because they're very popular books among the youth there. So, you know, I let them select, and they request a lot of books, but I try to turn them on to new titles and things that they wouldn't know about, you know, a lot that have to do with the real world and nonfiction, and then I try to throw in some self-enhancement stuff as well. So we have pretty much every kind of book you can think of there, including culturally specific collections for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and LGBTQ youth. And there's a lot of biographies by people from marginalized communities. So aside from the library itself, we have a few programs at Dolly Long, and one of the programs is a library volunteer program, and it's similar to what neighborhood libraries do. So the way it works is we have the youth fill out an application, and then they go through an interview process, and we ask some questions. One of the questions we ask is there a character in a book or movie that has inspired you? And one of my favorite answers was by a young man who said, this person isn't from a book or movie, but my grandpa was locked up for 20 years, and you wouldn't even know it. Except for the tattoos on his arm, you can't tell. He's one of the best people I know. Everybody in the community loves him, and he's just a good person. My father and my brother are always in and out of prison, and my mom's always drunk. My grandpa is a person that I really look up to. I want to be like him. So I think that the application and interview process teaches some valuable skills, and those skills can be applied later in life, you know, when doing other things. So after the interview, the youth get the job. They all get hired. Everybody who applies gets hired. Yeah, so, you know, it's a good thing. And then they come to work in the library. So the work helps them to become familiar with books and familiar with literacy. They do a lot of shelving of books, and they weed books for condition and stuff like that. And they learn organizational skills, and they help me curate the collection based on what they see and don't see in the library. So this is particularly useful for the Spanish collection that we keep there, because I don't have the mind or the cultural background or the language skills of a Spanish-speaking teenager. So to have them curate that collection makes a lot of sense. One of the best parts about this program is that the kids can use their volunteer hours to meet community service requirements and pay off court-ordered restitution. And sometimes these things are a condition for their release from Dolly Long. So we've had about 5 or 6 kids that were able to leave because they completed their community service hours in the library at Dolly Long. So before David Shine was teaching at Dolly Long, I had developed a current events class. The kids aren't allowed to watch the news or read the paper, so we would just get together and watch videos on current events, and then we'd have some discussions. And I'm always amazed at the kids' insight on certain topics, and I'm surprised at their opinions, because they're a lot different than the opinions that I had when I was that age. Like, kids just know so much nowadays. Like, they're very, very well informed. And at the end of that, we would usually watch videos. It's a good way to keep people engaged throughout the whole thing, because they're like, hey, at the end, we watch videos of your favorite artists, which might have been the highlight, I don't know. But the discussions were really great, too. Okay, so we also promote parenting resources when I come across young parents there, and it's not too often, but it does happen from time to time. And I partner with Shane Sowards, who runs the Squires program. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's a program, and they mentor young fathers and mentor young parents also in general, but particularly young fathers. And he's the person who puts on the PDX Young Parent Fair every year, which I highly recommend if you know any young parents attending that. It's great, full of resources. Puts on a great thing there. And then, so we give the young parents information, and we talk about the importance of early literacy and try to get them connected, to resources. So, and there's a few more programs. I'm not going to mention them right now. I'm going to get on to what I really care about here. I care about all of it, but this one in particular is close to my heart. Okay, so all of these programs are excellent and beneficial, but there is one program that stands out due to the impact I've witnessed it have, not only on the youth that I work with, but also on myself. So much so, in fact, that I've taken it beyond the walls of Donnelly Long and brought it to the Centennial School District and Sun School and Sun Summer School. And I have requests by youth to do this work in libraries around Multnomah County. And I'm working on expanding the program further. I have, in fact, had a counselor request this program for some at-risk youth at Centennial High School just to keep their interest in attending the school heightened. And I don't know if it was a recording class, but they graduated. So, that's, yeah. I mean, they did all the work. So, and the program I'm talking about is a music writing and production workshop, or as the youth call it, studio time or music class. So on its surface, it is exactly what it sounds like. We write, produce, and record music. However, when we look a little deeper, it is a lot more than that. So this program came about when I asked youth, actually in a current events class, if they would record music if I brought the equipment into Donnelly Long. And I got a very enthusiastic, yes, we would love to do that. So the library's programming and outreach division didn't hesitate to purchase the equipment that I asked for once that I told them it was to take into Donnelly Long to record the youth. And just a little bit of history about me. I've been playing music, recording music, and producing of some kind or another for about 25 or 30 years, depending on how you do the math. And I always have music on my mind. It's just a part of my life. And I'm pretty familiar with the musical process, just through experience. So that's the lens through which I approach this. It's not an academic lens. It's the lens of a musician, who likes to create music. So we started recording in groups. And at first, the staff would bring the whole unit, which is anywhere from 5 to 8 kids, and they'd bring them into the library to record. And so it's pretty amazing when you get a group of kids together who wouldn't even talk on the streets or who may even be from rival gangs, and you see them working together and helping each other, and they're laughing and they're having fun, and they're critiquing the music and, giving each other a hard time sometimes, but it's really teamwork, and they're really a group that is creating together. It's something to witness. And the group recording sessions can be pretty lively. So there's a lot of laughing and joking, and there's actually a lot of dancing that happens as well, which is pretty fun to witness. So the kids that I work with at Donnelly Long and Centennial High School have a lot of fun recording in a group setting. At Donnelly Long, the kids would show up to the library with notebooks full of lyrics and their MP3 players. And a lot of times when I would go onto the units, I'd hear youth practicing in their rooms. And I know Dave is familiar with that. He probably hears it quite a bit. And it wouldn't be uncommon to walk onto a unit and hear, hey, Jody, I wrote a new song. Can I get some beats? When can I record it? It'll only take 5 minutes. I can do it in one take. Dave, go get Jody. Dave, where's Jody? Come on. Anyway, so there is a thing that happens with pretty much all of the youth that I record with over a longer period of time. So often the first recordings that youth do are talking about material possessions and how cool a person they think they are. There's quite a bit of bragging, and with gang youth, there's some gang representation and talking about how tough they are and how tough their gang is. But invariably, the youth will come to me or Dave and ask for a one-on-one session. Or maybe they'll just want to have like one really good friend there with them. And when this happens, they'll oftentimes also ask the detention staff to not be in the area where we record. And that's when it happens. The artists will tell their truth. So they tell the truth about how they feel, and they tell the truth about all the things they've experienced. They talk about their needs, their desires, their sorrow, their joy, their anger and their fear, and their hopes in life, their love and their loss. Sometimes they talk about their addiction, their feeling of loneliness, and their general perspective on the world. And the list goes on. You know, they just really open up. In other words, they talk about all of the things that make us vulnerable as human beings. I recorded youth talking about absolutely heartbreaking upbringings and the things that happened to them. This is also one of the reasons why I work with Counselor Dave Norwood at Donald E. Long doing music therapy, because it's been proven to be one of the best ways to process trauma. So I've also recorded youth talking about their greatest joys and very special people in their lives, as well as their ambitions and where they see themselves in the future. And in all of these sessions, I see a lot of common threads among youth, especially the ones at Donald E. Long. This is how I know that life circumstances really do influence outcomes. Also, I really think there is something about being a teenager that isn't necessarily easy, no matter how good you have it. So far, I've recorded somewhere around 300 songs by youth around Multnomah County, and here's a small sample followed by a couple of testimonials.
You don't know about thugging with the gang, trying to duck the walls, trying to get away. You don't know about being stranded in the rain with no place to call home, so you feel so much pain. You don't know about thugging with the gang, trying to duck the walls, trying to get away. You don't know about being stranded in the rain with no place to call home, so you feel so much pain. You don't know, you don't know, you don't know, hey. You don't know, you don't know, you don't know.
I'm dying inside, I feel hopeless tonight. I have no one to call and nowhere to run. I'm losing my mind, I gotta stay trying. I have no one to hold, I got God by my side.
Nombre jefe, solo ando escribiendo lo que me pasó anoche cuando un carro se me acerca, me dice, oríate cabrón y que quebré la puerta.
Hey, I've been feeling lonely lately. These demons just want my soul. I be praying every day, but lately I just feel alone. It's like the ops just want me dead. So I gotta keep it pole. It's like I gotta keep a smile. I know Pop just want me home. Hey, it's getting lonely in my cell. I've been here for some time, ain't got no letter in the mail. I've been trying to survive from all this pressure that I feel, but my heart's been damaged twice. It's gonna take some time to heal. Hey, when mama left us, it's like my family fell apart. I struggle with my past since a young and I've been scarred, but I miss talking to my grandma. She said I'ma make it far. Wonder why mama had to leave us every day. Just give
Been to see me in a while. Pops ain't been to see me in a while, but it's all love. But it's all love. They ask me, who do you trust? Who do you love? They ask me, who do you trust? Who do you love? And lately it's been hard to say. With all these chilly nights and all these rainy days, that feeling from love just don't feel the same. That feeling from love just don't feel the same.
The reason I like recording is like it lets my mind get creative and just let go of everything. It keeps me looking at the positives and the negatives equally, so I'm not being held down in my room and inside my head, and I'm not like being restricted to just what I keep telling myself.
I like recording because it just makes me feel good about myself. It's just something that you can get your emotions out with and just have fun and be goofy with it or be serious. You could talk about your life story in it if you really need to and just really get your point, like your story across to other people, and it just feels better.
All right, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So, the change I see in all the kids I record with is notable even after just a few sessions. Kids gain confidence and have a little different perspective after recording. It also helps to create and maintain relationships with the youth. The kids trust the engineer and producer, you know. They trust us to have their best interests in mind. So however the youth record, they're creating. There have been several occasions where someone will say, I can't record, I've never done it, or I don't rap, I don't sing. And this isn't surprising because many of the youth I work with haven't had access to the necessary equipment. I just let them know that everybody starts somewhere, and maybe it's worth just giving it a shot to have the experience. Oftentimes, the kids are totally surprised and blown away by what they sound like when they listen back. And a lot of times they want to continue writing and they want to continue recording, and they ask, like, how much does the equipment cost, and where can I record once I'm out? So, and I have the answer. Usually, the answer for me is I have portable recording equipment. You can meet me at a library. Slide, please. There's a slide, and it's back a couple maybe. If you go backwards, yeah, right there, perfect. Sorry, you were probably already there. Anyways, so this is a quote by Dr. David Livingston Smith, who's a professor of philosophy at the University of New England. He has a lot to say about music, but this is a small piece of what he has to say. So he says, music gives us knowledge by deepening and expanding our capacity for experience. It somehow opens new channels in our mind, giving us access to features of the world that were previously inaccessible. The knowledge gained from music isn't something that can be put into words. So as humans, I think we've known this innately for quite some time. Music plays an essential role in Black, Latinx, and Indigenous cultures here in Multnomah County to this day. Music is a way of telling stories, expressing personal experience, archiving personal and group knowledge for the community, processing emotions, communicating to loved ones, connecting socially, and connecting with the environment. And it is a spiritual practice in many communities. It is a language, and it is a form of literacy. Not just in the abstract sense, but in a very direct and real sense as well. Almost every youth that I've recorded with, which is around 100, have written down what they want to record in a notebook or on a piece of paper. The few that haven't written down lyrics have worked very hard to commit words to memory or have such a quick command of the language that they can create on the fly, or freestyle, as we call it. So I myself am a musician and a program specialist, and I work to provide meaningful and beneficial opportunities for youth, especially youth who may be marginalized or who have less access due simply to the situation they were born into. But I would like to let some experts speak now. And to begin this part of the presentation, I'm going to relay some information from a friend I made recently. I met, there he is, great guy, I have to say. So that's Dr. Randall Horton, and if you ever get a chance to meet him and talk with him, I highly recommend you do it. He's just a wonderful person to communicate with. And I met Dr. Randall Horton at this year's American Library Association conference in Washington, D.C., and he's a professor of English at New Haven University and has won many author awards. And it turns out we have something in common. He recently started a program that's called Radical Reversal, and what he's doing is working on putting recording facilities in, studios in detention facilities across the United States. So we became friends because we had a lot to talk about. And here's what he has to say about making music production opportunities available to youth, particularly youth facing barriers. These are his words. I don't know if any of these kids are going to be writers or musicians, but I know that in working with these kids, they're going to be a better human being in some kind of way. The goal is to go through the process, the creative process, the imaginative process. Within that, kids begin to have a better understanding of themselves, and the value of it in terms of changing one's way of thinking is that through the creative process, it allows the imagination to dream beyond what they think is even possible. So to a person like me, that sounds like opportunity. So I would like to introduce my first in-person expert. This is one of the best library volunteers that I've ever worked with, and this is Cherry Hernandez Archuleta. And Cherry is an excellent poet and spoken word artist, and one of the youth that I record with currently in the Multnomah County Libraries. Cherry, take it away.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited, really nervous. My name is Cherie. I'm 17. I met Jody my time at Donald D. Long, which I was incarcerated from all summer of last year. I spent almost 11 months at Donald D. Long. I grew up in the system. I grew up in and out of group homes, in and out of holding cells, detention centers. I never found something that worked for me. I've always just kind of fake it to make it, go in there, do my time, come out. You know, I didn't have anything positive going for me. Um, Next month, it'll be a year out for me. And I never thought that I would say that out loud. I never thought that I'd be sitting here speaking, you know, and yeah. It doesn't feel real. Something else that I'm really proud of. I just got off probation on the 5th of this month, and yeah, I'm I'm off papers. I'm off papers. I completely changed, and it really wouldn't have been if it wasn't for, you know, Jody in the recording studio this time around. I was not like Jody said, you know, there's some kids that, you know, I don't want to record, I don't want to sing, and that was not my thing. I didn't want to go up to a mic and just sing. Like I didn't want to do that. But one thing that I loved and till this day is reading. I love reading. I loved, you know, in your cell, you're stuck in there. You just have you know, and a book, you can go into somebody else's world. You can experience something else. So I started reading a lot. I had a few hours of community service I had to get done. I'm one of the ones that got hired. I got hired. I got all my hours done. I was so happy. I would always be like, when can I go? When can I go? I didn't work with anybody else, so I had the whole library to myself. It was amazing. I loved it. And the feeling, it's I can't explain it, you know. It's like when you're incarcerated and you have an opportunity like that, it's amazing. I finished all my hours, and one day I just started writing. I just felt like I was reading, and you know, I was reading about this poet, Jimmy Santiago Baca, how he learned how to read and write on his own in prison, and I just started writing poetry, and I fell in love. I loved that I could figure out how to rhyme my words and, you know, put my feelings into, you know, on paper and make it all make sense to me, you know, a different kind of way of a different coping skill. One day I decided to go to the studio, and, you know, Jody was like, just give it a shot. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't want to. I'll just sit here, you know, like I'll watch all my peers do it. I don't want to. Finally, it was a cappella my first time. I remember I just spoke it. I just spoke my poetry, and he played it back for me. And I just looked at him and I was like, whoa, like, whoa. I came back another day. We did it over a beat. And ever since then, I kept doing it. And it really is true. When Jody walks in a unit at Donald D. Long, we're all rushing towards him. Like, when can we go to studio? I have something I need to get done. And I loved it. I think I have at least 5 poems that I have finished that you know, I'm proud of, would say. If it wasn't for Jody and if it wasn't for the recording, it wouldn't be a year of me being out next month. So I really am happy and glad that I got the opportunity to be able to find this coping skill, you know, find something else to, you know, be able to express myself, you know, yeah, I love it. Every day, whenever I get a chance, I sit down, I use my book or a pen, and and how he was talking about, everybody has a journal. I always kept my journal from Donald D. Long. I have all my poetries that I've ever worked on, all my poems, and I always keep my journal with me. It's something that I'll never forget. I always have it with me. Yeah, I have a poem that I'll share with you guys. Yeah. Another thing, I learned how to, you know, write poetry in my cell when it's just me, nobody else around me. This time being out, it was really hard. I remember I would text Jody or call him and be like, Jody, it's so hard now, you know, like I'm on the outs. How do I write? And like I can't. He's like, you just, you know, it'll come, and it came. It came. So you know, this is the second poem that I've wrote while being out. For my people sitting in a cell, reminiscing about the days all was well. For my people who got no date, but are still in there hoping for the day. For my people locked away, seeing nothing but cold bricks all day. We met while doing time, finished my sentence, now we're on separate sides. For my people holding it down, saying no names without a doubt. For my people who want a second chance, but stuck in a system with no helping hands. For my people who call once a week, I make sure to keep my phone right next to me. I found a new path I want you to see. I'm here, patiently waiting for your release. For my people, the incarcerated.
Thank you so much, Cherie. Okay. Yeah, that was just awesome. Okay. And with
Really
that,
awesome. Sheree, you are just, you are amazing. And it was fascinating to hear you say you didn't, trying to, when you started, it was difficult and trying to be your word, because you are, you're so obviously a poet. I mean, just the beauty with which you speak in the words that you put together, and the personal stories that you tell, you are a poet.
Thank you so much.
yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. David Shine over here. And David is an English and social studies teacher at Donnelly Long. And honestly, one of the best teachers that I've ever worked with. A teacher that I had wished that I had when I was younger, for sure. David.
Oh, thank you, Jody. Hopefully I can live up to that introduction now. My name is Dave Shine. I'm currently at Donnelly Long teaching English, social studies, and English as a second language. I have been a teacher in the urban setting for about 15 years. The first decade of my career I spent in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the last 5 I've spent here in Oregon. I've learned over that time that we need, as teachers, we need culturally relevant and responsible text to engage today's students. So I use music in my curriculum every day, probably too much to some people. I use it to teach writing, figurative language. I use it to teach narratives, abstract thought, current events, history. The list continues. I use it constantly. I also use it as an incentive at the facility and a way to connect to my students. Most students have some sort of relationship with music, and so I can use that to create rapport and develop positive relationships with my students. It's really a bridge with me and my students. And so when we talk about literacy, it goes far beyond the reading and writing. Get that slide. Literacy is really about the ability to communicate effectively through various channels. And some of these channels include language, reading and writing, technology, culture, and economics. Literacy in its most effective form combines and blends these channels, and music is one area where these channels actually connect. Traditionally, music has the ability to naturally connect language with culture. Poetry in its purest form is reliant on rhythm, form, structure, and pattern, as is music. So even oral traditions and spoken word poetry, they rely very heavily on rhythm, pattern, and structure. As language and culture progresses, so does music, right? And now music not only connects to the channels of today's digital age, but is now very dependent on the use of technology in music production and distribution. So what Jody and I do at Donnelly Long is we developed this studio workshop program where Jody does the production and the engineering with the students, and I pretty much run the content and do editing and revising with the students. Like I really focus on the writing. How we do that is we discuss current events, kind of like Jody was saying, and then we use those events and we use that content from these discussions to create socially aware music. So whatever's going on in the news, we write about those things. All right. And so that's the music we create. So one of the students that you heard on the recording was one of those gentlemen was the stereotypical gang member that you think of in the media and things, that there was very little hope for him, and he kind of assumed that he would be a product of the system until he found the music at Donnelly Long. And he was making a little bit of music, but since he had access to these programs, he recommitted to school, and you're going to hear that. You're going to hear that trend in my testimonials. So since he has been committed to music, he is now pre-certified to be a youth counselor. He also graduated, and he is recommitted to music, and he's told us a couple of stories about how music has kept him out of trouble at the state facility that he's in right now. We have another youth that, because of music right now, he's on pace to graduate on time, which is something that wasn't realistic for him before he came to the facility at Donaldly Long. And this particular kid, Jody and I worked with a couple of students in a songwriting contest last year, and a lot of these students really fell in love with writing, fell in love with music production. This young man I'm talking about right now fell in love with writing in general, started just pushing out essays one after another. I actually hinted at this particular student that I thought he had a brighter future in writing than rap music, and that did not go over very well with him. But it was very clear that he had a talent, and I don't know if we would have discovered that if he wasn't writing the music. Both of these particular young men, once they committed to music, they committed to their education. I think that's important that we understand that. Both of these guys realized that their music and their relationship to their lyrics and writing could go so much deeper if they gained more knowledge and just learn how to be better thinkers, which they were able to get through traditional schooling. And so we have a young man with us right now. And when he came in, aggressive isn't the right word, but neither is friendly. So somewhere in between there is where this young man was. All right. It's hard to kind of pinpoint, but respectful and a music connoisseur is probably what we'd call him now. And a lot of the notebooks that we're seeing, a lot of that is that's his notebook. Just like Cherie was saying, this kid, I had to put regulations on when he could write because he was writing in other classes and it was irritating the other teachers. But we saw a physical change when he realized he could do music. He was like Cherie, where he was never exposed to it really. And then once we exposed him to writing music and making music, he became a different person. And he's one of our model students now on the highest level that you can get. And he does music, he does school so he can do the music. So we have to regulate. We have to give him goals every day in his classes to meet that, and then he can start writing his music. And so if he's been inspired to become a different person because of the access he has to this program. So the problem is when they leave, how can they keep doing this? All right. Where are they going to find the access to be able to keep making music? A lot of these kids, what they do is when they get out, they go right back to the same environments that they were in that got them in trouble. And so our students need a safe place to continue their musical endeavors. They need access to real world equipment and professionals to help guide them in the world of music production. They need consistency and they need authentic support. And the library can provide this for the students all over Multnomah County.
Thank you, David. Yeah, Dave's being a little modest. So students in his class have won national songwriting competitions and have taken first place in national poetry writing competitions.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. So now I would like to introduce our next expert, Esperanza Spalding, and that is somebody else who's focused on music and community. And I'm going to have you come up here. Esperanza, if you're not familiar with her, is a 5-time Grammy Award winner, a Harvard professor, and Portland native. And I honestly can't think of anyone to speak on this subject. Thank you.
Hello, y'all. Good morning. All right. Well, I wanted to approach this kind of from 2 directions. So first I'll talk about my own story and how the library was so pivotal for me in music and just on my own path into the world. And then I want to share some reflections from working with students at Harvard and how I witnessed their access to music and their engagement with music affects their mind, affects their creative processes in all their fields. So I grew up in Portland, was a horrible student, always getting barely passing or not passing after about fifth grade. And so I was homeschooled for a long time because I just was doing so poorly in school. And for me, music was the only place that I felt capable. It was the only place that grown-ups were affirming my intelligence and confirming my capacity as a growing person. So, of course, I was less interested in school where I was just being failed, and I kept putting more energy towards music. But the music and the spaces for learning weren't integrated. So I really was on this path of shunning academics because it felt so futile. But my mother recognized that I had a brain, you know. She recognized there was some hope there, and we would spend a lot of times in the library. That was a place for reading. That was a place, obviously, for reading, but my mother was trying to kind of nudge me towards the possibility that there was something to this engaging with the world of writing, engaging with academics, etc. I'll just say it was the place that all of the books that I needed to fulfill my homeschooling requirements came from. So through the library, it started to feel like, okay, maybe there's something in this whole not music thing. And a really pivotal memory that I have as I became a teenager and was shunning even more of this whole idea of like books and reading and things that had to do with anything that's not playing music with my friends. There was this program in the downtown branch of the library where these elder jazz musicians got instruments together. It was actually in the children's area of the library and invited any youth who were interested in jazz to come play. And, you know, from being homeschooled and feeling completely like off and awed at any like grown-ups teaching things environment, that was really, I remember that as a turning point of like, oh, like we're wanted somewhere. Like I'm wanted somewhere. And I felt that stepping into the library, there was this interesting intersection of like, okay, it's this place that I know from a kid that was like fun and like ha 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 hoo hoo hoo. And it's this place where this thing that I feel capable in is being presented and I'm being invited in. And when Jody started talking to me about this initiative, that's the memory that came up immediately of like, oh yeah, there's something about feeling invited in as a young person where you felt so rejected by adults who are holding the keys to kind of this, you know, brain-based future of academics or of being good at reading or good at writing. It can feel like a brick wall that if you haven't passed through by all the grading measures, you're just not welcome. And immediately I remembered that sensation of feeling like, oh, I'm welcomed in. And for an adolescent person looking for trusting elders that they can trust and a place that they can feel welcome and safe, that is game changing. And I would say the equivalent of that now for young people who are longing to have a place to be welcome in their capacity as musicians, the equivalent of that is a recording studio. That's what I'm saying we as if I'm your age and I'm not, but that's what the music class is, what the group ensemble is, what the small ensemble is, what the private lesson is. And it's okay. Like even as a jazz musician, I've gone through my own evolution of surrendering some of my own stereotypes about what music education is. Like what counts as a viable pedagogy. And I'm seeing again and again that the studio, which there can be many versions of a studio, but one thing is for sure is most young people don't have access to a studio. So the studio is this pedagogical, nutrient-rich environment that a young being who is experiencing their emerging capacity as a musician can be welcomed into, and everything else can blossom from there. And that's just, as you've heard, that's just what it is. You know, there's no doubt about that. The question is about how can those spaces be well tended and facilitated in a way that they always do feel like a come on in here place. So then I want to speak about, okay, so fast forward. Through this path of music, I rediscovered this love for learning as I felt welcomed in where I was at, where I was thriving, feeling welcomed in that place. And fast forward, I guess, 32 or so years, 22 or so years, I teach at Harvard. I'm a Harvard professor. That's so crazy. You don't have to clap. It's okay. It's okay. And obviously, there were a lot of things between me being welcomed into the library and welcomed into these grown-ups in an environment that met me where I was at. But I really, I would have never seen this potential blossoming in an academic path, is what I want to say. And I also want to speak to, these studios aren't only for kids who don't feel welcome in traditional academic spaces or traditional spaces of learning or higher learning. I work with a lot of students who feel completely entitled to spaces of higher learning. They are sure that they are, and they are, the brightest, baddest, bestest students on planet Earth. You know, that's the expectation. And I'll also say, candidly, they're blocked in a lot of ways, because their whole method of encountering and engaging with knowledge has been through this very rigid lens of academia and your grade. And it's about recalling this information and being able to repeat it and show that you know it and show this command of what you've ingested. What I witnessed working with students, none of whom are music majors. All of my students are pre-med, they're in law, they're in economics, they're in business, and et cetera. I watch them feel welcomed into music spaces where they haven't felt welcome before, because that's not what they did. Like, no, I don't do music. I don't. And there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of shame around the vulnerability that being in music requires. And I watch these, I watch these people who are about to go out into the world and like swing that sword and that cachet of, I went to Harvard. I watch them put down some of that rigidity and some of that, like, I have to know everything and have it together, and just sing with each other and just play with each other. And I witnessed this like horizontal connectivity start to happen at this level that they've never been asked to cultivate as academics. That the music, by the nature of what it is, to be in music as an individual and to be in music as other, is facilitated for them. They don't have to get it, they don't have to understand it, they don't have to be experts at it. All of a sudden there's this place that is inviting them in where they're at and unlocking these profound capacities for connection making, for creativity. So also, I want to say that these studio spaces feeling accessible, and hold up, accessible outside of the parameter of your own little house or your own little setup. The potential for connections, the potential for unlocking these other dimensions of anybody's creativity is so profound. Like, it's beyond what we can even speak to and imagine in this room. It's so beyond what we can even imagine. So I'm excited for all beings who may not think that they have, you know, a welcome into music making, to feel welcome into that space. And I think that's all I have to say. Evan, it was just so great to hear you and all of you, and thank you for this time. Thank you.
I got some cool family. All right. Thank you, Esperanza. Beautiful perspective. I love it. So a big part of social justice is changing the relationships between institutions and communities. And a little can go a long way in connecting with people in a meaningful way and bringing folks together. When we let people know that their music, culture, expression, and ability to access creative tools matters to us, we're letting them know that we value them for who they are, and we value the communities in which they live. The youth that I work with in and out of Donley Long, and really anyone who has a desire, would benefit greatly by having access to quality music production equipment. Quite a few cities have professional recording studios as part of their library services. Some, like Brooklyn Public, Toronto Public, and Northampton Public, even lend instruments. So when I tell youth that we're advocating to have studios available in libraries around Multnomah County, they really light up. Like, they get pretty excited. And recording isn't something that just a few people who have the talent or know the right people do anymore. It's something that a lot of people are getting into because it's been demystified thanks to the internet and to technology being available. But it can still cost anywhere from, I don't know, I guess maybe $25 to $100 per hour to use a good full-service recording studio. And I personally know plenty of talented people and people who would like to record who are not able to afford that. Or you could get a little home setup for a few hundred to a few $1,000s, and I know plenty of people that couldn't afford that right now either. And I don't think that should preclude anyone from having the opportunity to create and produce music. So you never know what kind of talent you might find at the Multnomah County Library. You know, if we got the means, you know, and somebody, you know, somebody might not know what talent that they have or know what they're into, you know. And another thing, so last little piece here, if we can get recording spaces into libraries, and East County in particular, I give my personal guarantee that they will be in constant use. I will have no problem filling up those music studios. Okay, I would like to turn it back over to Vayli Elke.
All right. Wow, I feel a little boring, frankly. It's a good thing I wore a bright shirt. Thank you, everybody. I mean, this was everything I'd hoped it would be, and then some. You know, I suspect, like many of you, music has been at the center of my life since I was born. My mother was very musical. My family was very musical. You could ask me at any given time what song is going around in my head, and I can sing it to you because it's stuck there. So I appreciate the perspectives that people bring to this, and this is, you know, why it's important. And, you know, you have all heard me talk about, you know, libraries evolving and changing and the transformation of the institution. We also all know that, you know, libraries started, public libraries, at a time when books, printed books, were incredibly expensive, very rare, and only the wealthy and the privileged had access to books. You know, fast forward to 2022, that's different. You can get a good book on Amazon for $2.99. So what is precious about the public library and what it can offer its community? And I would argue that the community helps us understand what's precious. And what you've heard today is an indication of something that is deeply precious, especially for those in our community who are facing the greatest barriers. And so it makes perfect sense to me that programs like Jody's out at Donald E. Long and the potential for similar sorts of access in new library spaces has the potential to make incredibly profound impact on the lives of the people we're trying hardest to serve. So next slide, please. You know, some of you may know this artist, and I don't think I ever pronounced his name correctly. Emine? Emine, thank you very much. As someone with an unusual name, I'm sensitive to correct pronunciations. Emine, who is a musician here from Portland, that's his actual library card. He called us and asked permission to use it on his newest album, which of course we gave him permission to do. And we were thrilled that he was out there promoting this library and its potential to the rest of the world. And who's to say who's next? Who's going to be coming out of the Multnomah County Library as an artist, as a musician, as an influencer, as a talent, as a visionary, and can say and will say that it all started at their library. Next slide, please. So I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to really thank you for your time and your attention. I mostly want to thank David and Cherie and Jody and Esperanza for taking their time and for bringing their hearts and their passion to this presentation. And with that, if you have any questions, we're happy to take them.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And I'm not sure about questions, but I know that our commissioners would like to have some comments. So I'll start with you, Commissioner Stegman.
Oh, wow. I don't know where to begin. I just returned from traveling to my birth country, Korea, and I was thinking about how much culture plays a role in the safety of our community. And so hearing all about music and the role that and the importance that music plays in the lives of our youth is such a beautiful way to engage with youth. And I know I've spoken to Veli and many of you about another initiative that I've been working on, something that I'm loosely calling Peace Through Music. But you all are doing it. So I want to talk more with you. And by the way, the flagship library will be in Gresham, which is in my district, which we know. I'm so glad to hear, Jody, that you're working at the Centennial High School. These are neighborhoods that I grew up in, so I'm really familiar. And I've spent a night in the Donald Lee Long home. So I do have some understanding of the challenges that our youth are experiencing right now. And Cherie, oh my gosh, you are amazing. I think you're next. You're going to be incredibly, wildly successful. So keep believing in yourself because you got it. And Dave, oh my gosh, teachers are so important. Just the heart and the wisdom that you impart to these youth who are starving, for that guidance and that love and that light. That's what we need more of. So keep up the good work. And I know Esperanza had to leave, but wow, oh my gosh. I feel like, man, Portland is really, has so much to be proud of. And while we have our struggles, some really amazing, beautiful souls have come out of a place of heartache and challenge and really have risen and represent all the best in us. And yes, I think that, we have 90 acres at the Vance Vision, a project that I am redeveloping, leading, and I think a recording studio there would be amazing. So we can talk some more. And finally, Veli, what you talked about of what's precious and our youth and our culture and giving, welcoming people into a space that they don't always feel welcomed in, and they're not. And the fact that you are able to create a space for everyone to feel, when I went back to Korea, I often don't feel at home in the United States because people don't look like me. But when I went to Korea, there's 10 million people in a city that look like me. And, that changes your perspective when you're a minority in a white dominant culture. And I'm just saying that it is so important to be welcomed into a space. And that is precious. So thank you all for sharing. Amazing presentation. Thank you.
Commissioner Jaipal?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all. I feel totally inadequate to the task of synthesizing what we've heard here this morning, and I think I'm going to keep my comments brief because every single one of you has had something so profound and meaningful to say that I want to kind of marinate. I've taken a ton of notes here. Maybe the most important one is in all caps in the middle of the page. It says, "I love this so much." David, thank you for your words and for making the connection between music and literacy and learning. I think that's been a theme here, and for the work that you do. It's truly, truly profound and amazing. Cherie, as others have said here, you are amazing. Thank you for sharing your experience and your story with us. You are absolutely a poet and a musician and a wise voice. I heard a wisdom coming out of you at 17 that just you are a wise voice. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. Jody, thank you for what you've put together. It truly is absolutely wonderful. And thank you for the ways that you've described why this matters and why this matters for our young people, why this matters for our community. Veli, thank you for always reminding us to be expansive about what libraries can and should be. We had this conversation not so long ago, and you reminded me that books were the precious resource back then, and other things are the precious resource now. And if this was a pitch for funding for recording studios, I think I think it has landed on receptive ears. Ms. Spalding had to leave, but please thank her so much for coming here and for presenting to us. I think maybe if I were to try to synthesize, I remember a quote I ran across a while back that said, music reminds us that we're human. And I even in the darkest of times and in the darkest of places. And I think what you've all reminded us of is that. So thank you so much for being here.
Commissioner Myron?
So I was literally having like a waterfall of tears during this presentation, particularly, the places where I was just flowing was during that sort of montage of youth and the recordings that you're playing together, and that was just so powerful. And also, Cherie, during your poem, the timing of this presentation is so, this is a perfect presentation literally anytime. But as I was driving to work today, I was hearing on NPR, it was the story about this effort to ban a bunch of books in Louisiana and one parish, and this heroic librarian who was so traumatized but was standing up to these efforts that they're trying to bring statewide. And I was...
I'm sorry, Commissioner, can you turn your microphone on?
Why, thank you, Chair. I was traumatized hearing this story, and this sort of transcending this censorship is really exemplified by what we're talking about here today. It is the opposite, and it's that love trumps hate, And so just the timing, thank you, I am so grateful. The presentation did transcend that day-to-day and the where we are and the stuff that we just kind of are going through as part of our lives. But it also shows how this is the fabric of our lives. This is the day-to-day, and putting that together is what is so brilliant. Cherie, I just have to agree with what my fellow commissioners, what the chair have said. You are a poet, you are a gift, and I just deeply appreciate that you shared of yourself with us here today. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing what you do next. And then Dave, wow. You talked about so much the influence that you have had on all the lives that you've touched is so profound. And, you talked about that bridge that music can be as a, that I love the metaphor. I don't know if metaphor is the right word. You're the English teacher. Analogy, I don't know. But it is that bridge, and how you put it together is truly beautiful in your partnership there with Jody and with all of this work. And I know Esperanza had to leave, but the sharing of those memories that she had and how libraries really played into the formation of her and her work and who she is as a human was very, very profound as well, because she's a genius, and offering of that gift to the world and understanding how it came to be was really inspiring here today. And I love the description that she gave of the studio being that nutrient-rich environment where the creativity and potential can blossom, that garden. And so we have the potential to offer those gardens in our libraries and tend them. And I am so excited that we are doing this work for everyone in our community, but particularly those who have so many barriers and don't have other places to go to access this. And, you know, I have to just mention my husband is a musician, and he was a professional musician before going. I met him in med school, and he, you know, always music is his heart and soul. And, you know, he moved out, majored in music in New York, SUNY Stony Brook, then moved out to the West Coast, San Francisco, was in this band in the 80s, you know, it was about social justice, co-founded a underground artist cooperative in San Francisco. And, you know, he was in it. And to earn a living, he was, you know, driving cabs and painting houses and doing all this stuff. And finally, he did go back to school to, you know, earn a living, and music has always been his heart and his soul. He's retired now, and we have a studio in our basement. He is writing music. He's inventing instrument. Like it's just like his spirit has been freed, and so he's really wanting to bring music. He's like, what about bringing music to Unity for behavioral health, our BHRC, the resource center, because the impact of the opportunities to express creativity on mental health and well-being is so profound. So I know Commissioner Stegman mentioned peace and music, and so love to have further conversations just about even how much further we can go. But Jody, you are not, I sort of wrote this down, I thought it was really clever, but you're not just a musician, but you're a magician. And you have honestly worked magic in bringing together all the different partners and having that inspiration that you are seeding so many souls with at Donald Long and throughout the community. And now it is just having the ripple effects are tremendous. And I'm blown away. I honestly don't have words. So I just want to express my gratitude for all that you're doing and bringing it all home. Vali, of course, you know, you nailed it. It's what's precious in our communities and how our libraries have that potential to make an impact on those who have faced the biggest hardships, the highest barriers in their lives, and on everyone. And so that's it. There was one quote I wanted to quote. My husband loves this quote. Musician or composer Yip Harburg, who's said that words make you think thoughts, music makes you feel feelings, and songs make you feel thoughts. And I just thought that was a really, really cool quote and had some bearing here today. So thanks to all of you.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Really appreciate it. But before we all scurry off, would you mind coming up and having a picture with us, please? Thanks. And I'll sing my song that's on my mind today, which is Leaving on a Jet Plane. I'll pretend to be Mama Cass.
I'm sure you're mistaken all the time. I sound just like, you know what song I have?
But Esperanza has to leave. We should have done a little earlier. For Esperanza left.
Yeah, no, I was hoping to get my own picture.
I'm just gonna get it, like if someone could take a picture.
Okay, everybody's ready? First, just look at this camera. All right, 1, 2, 3. Which one you want me to take this? I got one. Oh, you got it. Whose one is this? Oh, that's yours?
No, I don't know.
All right, everybody got it? Oh, one more.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you so much.
I feel very sorry for our next group of presenters to have to follow that. But it is very important, so if we could.
Pleasure to meet you. I'm Steve Redmond.
I know.
I don't know if you'd have a moment for a couple whenever is a good time for you.
We have one more briefing, and extremely important, although I will be honest, not quite as gripping. So, our next team to come up to present is our fantastic, fabulous public health. Okay, our public health team. It's Commissioner Myron's phone, and she's coming to get it.
Oh.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning. Tough act to follow.
Good morning. I know. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Dr. Jennifer Vines. I'm the Multnomah County Health Officer.
I'm sorry, just a second. Can you take the comments outside, please, everyone? I know it's hard to calm down after such a fabulous presentation this morning, but we do have more to hear. So thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Vines.
Thanks. It's never easy to go after the library, but today especially, it feels especially difficult. So thanks for your time this morning. Go ahead and advance. I'll just review our agenda with you this morning. We're going to review our public health goals for COVID-19. We're headed into our third COVID-19 fall and winter. And I'm going to ask Chantel Reed to introduce herself to you and review the public health goals. She is our new Deputy Director for Public Health. She comes to us from New Orleans, and she's been just a fantastic thought partner and a fresh set of eyes. So you'll be hearing more about her and from her in just a moment. I'm going to share with you our COVID-19 data updates, including some new information on some initial analysis of local Multnomah County cases that result in death from COVID-19. And so we're going to start to answer the question of who is still dying of COVID-19 in the era of a less severe virus and fairly plentiful vaccine. Kim Taves, who you know, will share vaccine updates, and we'll also give you a little bit of information about our back to school preparation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chantel.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I've met some of you informally, but it is my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Chantel Reed. I am currently the Deputy Director of Public Health and Special Projects for Multnomah County's Health Department. I hail from New Orleans, Louisiana, and have done a considerable amount of work in public health and healthcare administration and operations just in general. I am very, very excited to join this team. I think that Jen, Kim, and I have clicked already, really to kind of process, like, where do we go next in this thing? So I'm very, very pleased to be here before you today to share some of our lessons learned, to share some of where we're going to go directionally going forward. One of the things that we have met with and talked about was our public health goals for the next fall, right? So the next phase of where we go with COVID in our response. We are going to be heavily intent on really making a transition from this broad-based general response in an emergency preparedness type manner. Our intent is really to decrease BIPOC mortality, right, and look at education and vaccine promotion in regard to access. That's going to be a critical point in making sure, not just with COVID, but as we come out of the phase of a lockdown pandemic type of perspective, but how we support families and just people in the community with immunizations overall. So highly focused on education, highly focused on access, but in a more concerted way so that it is not just a broad-based emergency level response. The reality of this is that we have to transition into living with COVID in our community. But this will give us the opportunity to be responsive to whatever virus or disease presents and manifests in our community in a meaningful way. Second priority, but as a parent and as many of you all are as well, it is keeping kids in school and keeping schools open. We have met with the schools. I have been, in my very short time here, the team has brought me into conversations with the school systems, and we've had conversations with them on what would be the no-go, right? The stop zone on where we would have to make those decisions. At this moment of where we are, and you'll hear a little bit more in the presentation from Kim, we're at a place where, and as you have heard, and I want to be clear, from the presentation that we had before us, children need to be engaged. And they need to be in settings where we can give them as much support and services and information as possible. So that is going to be the forefront of our goal. We will keep a pulse and open conversations with the school systems. However, I don't foresee us coming here and asking you for us to be in a place of, what does it look like to close down schools? The school partners have been very committed to working with us, and we will be working lock and step with them in moving forward. The third goal is continuing to monitor the outbreak response in our high-risk settings. That is where we're going to see some of the most critical need and some of the places where we would have to focus more resources. Those are your nursing homes. Those are the community congregate settings. We are going to make sure that the data leads us where we need to go as far as responding to issues that burgeon within those communities. And last, it is continuing the epidemiologic response to do our decision-making. The numbers will drive us. I came from New Orleans where we had to shut down bars and we had to shut down a lot of these things that people were like, oh, no, we don't do that. I will say that just in my very short time working with the partners here, the community has been very receptive, and they have been in a place where they trust where we go with the numbers. And that is going to continue to drive how we strategize moving forward with any response. You're going to hear more from Dr. Vines and more from Kim on the direct response, but my hope is that the framing of knowledge that I have gained in traveling and being a part of a larger COVID response across the country, how we pair that with the information and people here in the community. We're going to have an intent focused on BIPOC community and how we reach those who are most adversely affected. I'm looking forward to working with you and where we go next, and those goals are going to be, fleshed out a little bit more in this presentation, but you're going to hear from us on where we go, just not only right now, but throughout the fall. We're locked and loaded, and we're ready to respond to whatever presents for us. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Vines.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through some COVID-19 data. Again, some of this will be very familiar. Some of this will be new, though, for you. So next slide. So this might be our farewell to this particular metric. So I'll just pause a moment. This is our percent positivity, which you've heard me say many times, was useful when we had the universe of testing sort of in public health site, which was the positives over the total volume of testing, which provided, I thought, a very helpful barometer of where things were. Testing now, there's so little testing now coming onto the actual public health dashboard, so to speak, that this is now probably largely inflated from a low denominator with a lot of, as you know, a lot of testing happening in homes and a lot of people just sick and not able to test. So let's just consider this a farewell for this particular metric and go to the next slide. This is our epi curve. This is cases over time. So this really shows you calendar year so far, which is the Omicron era. And again, this is also imperfect because so many tests are happening outside of the public health lab reporting structure. But this still gives you a sense of what happened over the summer, right? So when you look over to the right, you kind of see that lump, and that was friends, family, and maybe some of you individually who were sick or knew someone who had COVID. And this is really from the Omicron subvariants, so those descendants of Omicron that we call BA4 and BA5, fueling just a lot of disease transmission activity over this summer. Next slide, please. These are COVID-19 hospitalizations, again, defined broadly. So if you're in the hospital for any reason and test positive for COVID, you will register on this graph. And again, this just shows the cycle that we've all now lived through of these peaks and valleys happening at roughly 2-month intervals, with a bit of a prolonged extension over the summer, again, because of the Omicron subvariants. Next slide, please. This comes to us from the Oregon Health Authority COVID dashboard, and I wanted to share this with you. This is a similar timeline as you look across the graph. This is basically, this goes back actually to the beginning of the pandemic almost. This goes back to May 2020. But you see the peaks and valleys of hospitalizations over time, and the top squiggly line is hospitalizations. The bottom two are people who are in the hospital but who are in intensive care unit, and then below that, people on ventilators. And what you notice is that the lines track with this about the same shape relative to the peaks and valleys until we get to the more recent era, so from, say, March onward, where you start to see those intensive care unit and ventilator lines start to flatten relative to the peak of people who are hospitalized with COVID. This is what we mean when we in public health say that Omicron overall is less severe. So I'm not trying to tell someone who is represented in those ICU or ventilator numbers that their COVID is not severe. It obviously is. But at a population level, at a group level, we see fewer people needing intensive care unit and ventilator types of interventions relative to the number of people who meet that COVID hospitalization definition. So I find this useful, and I hope you do too. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a bit about COVID-19 mortality, and I limited this question to, again, the Omicron era, which is really January to the present day, which has been dominated by Omicron, which we call overall less severe. The other marker of the Omicron era, as you all know, is that vaccines really were much less effective in preventing that initial infection, but as I'll show you, have actually held up quite well against severe disease and the worst possible outcome, which is mortality. I'm going to show you some analysis by our Multnomah County-based epidemiology team, which is always a pleasure to work with and to hear from. So I'll be representing their work. And I'll be presenting data that is reported as Multnomah County COVID-19 deaths as reported to Oregon Health Authority and as recorded in the state public health database. So next slide, please. So the first thing to show you is that these are deaths per week. So the first thing to notice as you look across this graph, our team divided the Omicron era into the original Omicron and then the subsequent variants, the BA2, which was in the spring, and then BA5 over the summer. And the first thing to notice is that the COVID-19 deaths that meet the death definition, they basically vary. They go up and down as disease transmission in the community goes up and down. So there's no surprise here, but when you hear about a lot of COVID-19 deaths or few COVID-19 deaths, that is going to track with just how much COVID-19 there is in the community. The definition of what is a COVID-19 death is actually very broad. So it can be someone who has tested positive within 2 months of their death. If they're hospitalized before dying, it can mean if they tested within 14 days prior to their hospitalization or any time in the 2 months following their hospitalization. It also includes what many people would think of as a death from COVID-19, which is where COVID-19 is actually listed on the death certificate as a contributor. But as you look at these numbers, it's that very broad definition that's included here that's consistent over time. And our team is actually going to be looking to try to drill down to more of that sort of death certificate level cause of death to have information to share with you if you're interested. They also are limited in how much they can discern based on race and ethnicity because of how data has been collected and logged at the state level. So that is a limitation. But first key point is that deaths are going to go up and down as disease activity goes up and down. Next slide, please. This one I actually think is very interesting. So in an era where we talk about a less severe virus and plenty of vaccine, including boosters and now second boosters, who is still dying from COVID-19? Again, based on that broad definition, when you look, the proportion of people who are unvaccinated are the most represented in that group, followed almost in stepwise fashion by people who are less and less vaccinated, with those who are having received their first 2 doses and their booster, the least represented, so the most protected when we look at COVID-19 deaths. So key point here, be vaccinated and get your booster. Next slide, please. Deaths by age, you see what we call an exponential increase in risk of death with increased age. This graph illustrates that really nicely. This has been consistent throughout the pandemic, where we know that the older age groups are at much higher risk compared to younger of death. That's not to say that deaths don't occur among younger people, but risk goes up quite a bit just with chronological age. I should say chronological age also as a driver of poor underlying health conditions that also drive COVID risk, so cardiovascular or diabetes, for example. Next slide, please. When we actually look at COVID deaths by age and sex, we start to see men. They are represented by the red bar. We start to see men outnumbering women. The hypothesis here is that men generally tend to be less vaccinated than women. They also tend to have poorer health than women, largely driven by presence of cardiovascular disease and diabetes, which both increase risk of death from COVID. Next slide, please. So bottom line again, first is that our local epidemiology team is fantastic. They do these analyses. Remember that we're talking about a very broadly defined set of criteria to be counted as a COVID death. As I've shown you, they're going to go up and down as disease activity goes up and down. You definitely want to be vaccinated and boosted to stay out of this group. It remains age as the primary risk factor, which supports our approach to outbreak response in high-risk settings. And the higher proportion of deaths occurring in men, I take that as another reason to be working towards improving the underlying health of our community through efforts related to physical activity, nutrition, tobacco, alcohol, all of those drivers that we've brought to you in your role as Board of Health as the leading causes of death. So that is it for my data piece. I don't know, Chair, if you want to pause for questions or push on. You're going to hear about vaccine and schools next.
Yep, let's just keep on.
Okay, great. Kim Taves, you're up.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Kim Taves. I'm the Communicable Disease Director for Multnomah County Public Health. Good to be with you all. I only have a couple slides. One is on vaccines and one is on back-to-school preparations. So the first slide here, Omicron boosters are expected after Labor Day for everyone aged 12 and older. And just to remind everyone, there's a process where FDA and CDC weigh in, create use guidelines. Then it comes to a Western states research group, which Washington, California, and Oregon have agreed will review the guidelines. Then it comes to each state individually, and each state's health authority, governor, et cetera, review the guidelines. And then they come out to us as ready to put into action, us being public health and our pharmacies and our broad healthcare system. So we do expect when these do arrive, the vaccine will be widely available through the normal channels that we've all come to expect, our multiple sites and locations where folks can access vaccine. This is the first one that really has been formulated differently than the initial vaccines we had to be a better match with the series of variants that we note are in like the Omicron family. So this is significant to us, and we would really recommend that the folks who are eligible go ahead and get vaccinated this fall with this. If they haven't started their series yet, they'll need to go ahead and get the initial series, and then they can get this booster after that. Next slide is back to school. So some schools have started, some schools are imminently going to start. You're going to switch to the following slide. Thank you. Chantel already talked about importance that I think we all share of keeping kids in school. And we would just want to mention that the vaccine availability for the kiddos and masking are both strategies that are to stabilize schools being able to stay open. Enough kids to be well to continue school, enough teachers on staff and the other administrative staff to be well to continue to have school be able to be open as a safe place for the kids to come to. Those both work hand in hand. We do look towards fall always as the typical respiratory season for flu, for colds, and then COVID will probably be on top of this in one way or another. So the ways that we will continue to work with schools are the ways that we've developed over time in terms of now having a school-dedicated outbreak team as part of the communicable disease team, and we have a full-time school and child care liaison on the communicable disease team, as well as the representation of our health officer, Ann Loeffler, who's a pediatric infectious disease specialist. They meet regularly with the schools and help them parse through what's the best infection control practices that each school may need to implement if there is an outbreak, and then what are the prevention measures that maybe all districts want to look at. The outbreak definition has changed. It's pretty high threshold now to get defined as an outbreak. It would be 30% absenteeism at the school level or 20% of a cohort. A cohort, for example, would be a whole kindergarten classroom, plus a confirmed COVID case among those kids who are out. What that triggers is it triggers notification to parents so that they're aware that that's happening. That notification may have mask recommendation. The districts may require masks at that point. Helps remind folks about symptoms, about vaccination eligibility, about appropriate exposure, testing timelines, and then all those other infection control measures in terms of cleaning, et cetera, that we've worked on for so long with folks. Kiddos and staff still need to isolate for 5 days at home if they are sick with COVID infection. They return once they've had no fever for 24 hours. It is recommended that they mask for another 5 days. Just reminding everyone where we left off in the spring, there isn't any quarantine right now for exposed kids or adults. CDC does recommend that folks mask and get a test at day 6 if they can. Schools can require masking. It would be less usual to expect that we at Public Health would be coming before you all as a jurisdictional authority to make a requirement. It would be more that Public Health probably at this point would be recommending to schools, at which point we would ask them to consider requiring masking. So we'll work with them closely as partners. Some schools are still providing notification to parents individually for individual cases, but especially private schools. But some schools, it's up to them if they choose to only notify for outbreak and not for all those letters that any of you that are parents may have received, numerous letters saying your kid was exposed again, your kid was exposed again. So I think that's a change as well. And there is less testing going on. Most schools still have access to testing for staff who are sick, for kiddos who are sick, but there's not that required testing anymore to get back into school. And there aren't that many schools right now that are doing that, what we call surveillance testing, which is testing a bunch of folks who don't have any symptoms just to see how much is there as like sort of a baseline in the background, undiagnosed infection. So I think that's my overview for where we're all at moving forward. And we don't have predictions about what we may expect to see in schools. We will all have to see what happens. And we know that as well. We're all used to when a new variant arises, we watch it for a while. Is it more infectious? Is it less severe? Is there a change in it or not? How well does it match the vaccine we have? So as Chantel said at the beginning, we'll continue to come back to you all through the fall with updates. I think that's what we have.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome again. It's good to see you here. Questions, comments, Commissioner Myron?
Thank you. Yes, first of all, Chantel, it's really good to see you. Welcome. And I'm very excited about the sort of the breadth and depth of experience that you are bringing to us from other areas of the state. And so it's great to see you. And thank you, Dr. Vines and Kim. I have questions about two things. The first is for, the highest mortality is for elders, and, looks like age is the primary risk factor. And is that across people who, you know, we're assuming the groups we're looking at are all vaccinated and double boosted, and is that correct? Like it says elders are the most likely. Is that assuming they're all with the same underlying vaccination rates, I guess?
I would have to double check, Commissioner. I think that's all comers, and that's consistent. But I'm understanding your question, like, is a fully vaccinated and boosted 80-year-old at lower risk than, say, an unvaccinated 60-year-old? I would have to check and see how that actually balances out.
Okay, I would be interested in getting that information, so would appreciate that. And, you know, that ties into what you said in terms of, you know, men being higher risk, say, than women, but they are less likely to be vaccinated, have all these other factors. And so I would just ask the same questions of.
Got it. So age independent of vaccine status. Follow up.
Yeah. And then I am curious if you're able to speak to mortality rates for Black, BIPOC, Multnomah County residents. I feel like there was I'd heard about for, you know, even looking at 2021, what the sort of cumulative data showed and the trends, and given that, you know, the priorities that we have expressed and the work that we're doing to focus on those populations, just curious about the outcomes and how we are doing compared to the rest of the state for our own goals, et cetera.
Yeah, so that's an area that I knew would be of interest. We're going to do what we can. Some of it is that we actually don't have data from the state because when intensive case investigations, so those intensive interviews of individual cases, when that practice started to wind down in 2021, that started to limit reliable race ethnicity data for COVID-19 cases and deaths. So there's a limitation there. It may be that we can go back further and look at race ethnicity trends in death, but it's going to be imperfect, but there is more analysis to come from our EPI team on this question, knowing that that's of interest.
Okay, and up until, I would be interested in getting two things then. So the information that we have up until those in 2021, when those trends stopped, when the winding down occurred of that depth of information gathering. And then again, when our teams have been able to look more in depth at that, it's surprising to me that that would be the case. But you know, both general trends up until the information the state has, and then subsequently given our in-depth investigation. And do you have when just sort of estimates of when that kind of information might be available?
I mean, this is something that our EPI team is working on. I would say in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that would be great. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Jayapal.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Chantel, welcome. Good to see you. Really looking forward to working with you. Just a couple quick questions. So kind of following on Commissioner Myron's questioning about, you know, mortality rates or by, does the state or we writ large not collect data on race and ethnicity for deaths?
So that systematic data collection stopped with the winding down of individual case interviews in late 2021. We're hoping that the additional analysis we can do is looking by death certificate to try to narrow into what most people would intuitively think of as a death from COVID-19. We may get more information there along race ethnicity lines that we'd be happy to share back to you.
I see. So we do collect it for death certificate purposes, but we had a more robust process through the case investigation that allowed us to get there more quickly and readily.
I think that's a true statement.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, it just seems to me that the state would collect that regardless, and so I'm kind of puzzled that it doesn't, I guess. Yeah, okay.
I would say one of the things when Kim and I met, we've talked about like how we stratify all of the data for race and ethnicity. So I know that's some of the things that I've been looking for as well to see, like, just so we can look at, you know, to Commissioner Meehan's point, what are the, you know, key points on race? What are the key points on comorbidities? You know, what are the trend lines that we can be able to follow? So yeah, this is something that I've been asking as well. They're gathering it. I'll say that the EPI team, Kim, has been working very clearly with them on, you know, how we present this information and what it looks like going forward. I think, you know, you noticed from the presentation, a lot of it is, you know, it's making an adjustment, right? It's been a very broad perspective, and we've been doing a very deep dive into it from a different perspective, and now it's going to change.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that, you know, my question is no way directed to what we collect, it's directed to the state.
Right, what the
and-
state, yeah.
Yeah, so appreciate that. On the Omicron booster, maybe we don't have guidelines for this yet, but how does that fit with the other boosters? In other words, are you supposed to wait for a while? If you've had both your boosters, does it not matter? Do we have information about that sort of stuff?
Well, my understanding is that it's been scaled, right? So very initially it needed to be 90 days. And then we also received guidance in the very beginning. It was after a positive test, then you need to wait. That has changed, and I'll say the goalpost has moved several times. As it relates right now, it is the baseline criteria is that you have received the first two. For this next one, the next iteration, we're not, you know, it evolves, I'll say, right? So the key point is like working with the LPHAs and working with Dr. Vines and health officers to really kind of look at, you know, where directionally, honestly, I would say probably from AMA and other different sources on what their feedback is on how it proceeds forward. Right now, the baseline is that you've received the first two. And from that, we're going to make sure that we make a distribution out into the community from that information that we have.
Thank you. And then going to schools for a bit and masking, you know, I think it was you, Kim, who said that likely we wouldn't require, but we would recommend that schools require if we get to that point. I'm curious about how you would be approaching that decision. Like, are there rough criteria that you have in mind? You know, what would you need to see, do you think, in order to start that conversation?
Do you have a sense of how you would want to answer that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think, so if there's a new variant that is, you know, more severe or somehow more severe in children, that's a game changer. And I will set that aside and assume for this question that we're talking about Omicron type virus. I think, you know, masks stabilize schools. So they tend to take the general transmission down. It doesn't mean they protect each individual student, and it certainly doesn't mean that every parent is happy to send their child to school with a mask. But I think we've talked about it from the sense of some shared decision-making with schools around where might we need to take the temperature down, whether that's in a classroom, whether that's in a school, depending on the continuity piece. So where is disease transmission interrupting services? And at what point do we have buy-in from the school district and from parents to say, okay, we're all willing to go back to masking so that we can all continue sports and stay in school? And I think that's going to vary from school to school and situation to situation. Would you add anything?
Schools can move into that mode before they reach that state threshold as defined of outbreak, and schools may indeed find out that by the time that threshold is reached, it's sort of too late to do those earlier prevention measures. And so it'll be interesting to see how responsive they feel they need to be with masking as a tool in order to prevent getting to that point. Yeah.
So it sounds like really when the criteria is interruption, so it is that 30% is the state level for defining an outbreak, but you know, you might be looking at, well, maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 20%, but it's some sort of evaluation of our schools finding that they can't continue to serve students.
I'll just add, like, we've done this brainstorming and we've really kind of put the minds together in the room, and that's exactly our line of thinking, that while that's the, 30% is the state threshold, we're going to be in continual conversations with the school because it may, hit that point a lot sooner.
And I will 30% is an extremely high threshold.
It seemed really high to me.
Yeah, it is.
There's a sense of a lost prevention opportunity in there. Again, it's it's a values choice about what a school community is willing to do to avoid getting there versus when it just is incredibly apparent that, more needs to be done.
Yeah, and will that, from our perspective, in terms of the guidance that we give schools, will we be doing it on a school-by-school basis or a collective, is there some sort of collective community threshold that we'd be looking at as well?
I think we've talked about the combination that the outbreak team really works very individually with the school to see which group of students or staff within that school and what can we do at that point. But we're also all aware of that community threshold, the CDC puts out as like red, yellow, green risk level. And I think that those two things need to be weighed together. I will also remind folks that sometimes the reason that the school is closing temporarily is either that they don't have enough staffing, right, to like meet their threshold of like overseeing kids' safety at school, and they're closer to that threshold now, just like healthcare are with like some of the staffing challenges. And the other thing is that sometimes you have enough kids out that so many of those kids will have missed lessons, and the teacher can no longer teach to a classroom with so much discordance, and it's disruptive in that way. And so sometimes schools, as we've seen in the last year, have made a pause for that reason. Yeah, so those are worst case scenarios that I think if masking prevents either of those, then a short term of masking would probably be something that schools would move to a little bit more quickly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Following up, I don't have kids in school, so refresh my memory. So are youth required to wear masks in any of our school districts at this point? No. Okay. But they're required to be vaccinated? Is that correct or not correct? They're not. So there are no requirements currently. Okay. And same with teachers and personnel in our schools?
As far as I know, correct.
Yeah, I'm gonna say not on a, composite level, but it is, very specific, I guess. But I've not seen anything since I've been here on any mandates on vaccines, testing, or masking.
Okay. And then going back to Commissioner Jayapal's question, so those of us over 50, and if we have a booster, we had the first 2 shots, and then we had the regular booster, and then you could get an extra one if you were over 50. And so, can you get too many? So I'm kind of lost. What are the guidelines for people that have over 50, have had those 4 shots of when they would get that vaccine after September 6th?
Yeah. So there's typically been a spacing period between vaccine doses and between boosters. We're waiting to see what the guidance is for the Omicron-specific booster, both from an age standpoint, although I'm hearing 12 and over potentially eligible. And I don't know how they're going to recommend spacing, because I'll just point out the obvious, which is for the first time we actually have a vaccine that is well matched to the circulating virus. And so I would think that a minimum interval would be in the best interest of community health, but it'll be for the federal level various vaccine vetting organizations to hand us that guidance.
Okay. And just curious, so when I was traveling outside of the United States, somebody had tested positive, but and Korea's really, you had to test before you left the United States, then you had to test upon arrival. And so this person tested positive upon arrival, but because he had had COVID 45 days prior, they were fine with that. So can you just kind of explain that to me?
Yeah, so typically when you test positive, you're generally considered to have recovered from COVID infection for the 90 days following. So if you have another positive test within 90 days, at least in this country, that's considered to be a holdover of a trace of virus from your original infection, and you're still considered in the clear. You're not considered newly infected.
Okay, that makes sense. And then going back to the home test, I think, early on, I remember being, I had an event to go to that night, and maybe I had the sniffles, and I would think, okay, I'm going to go test, right? And then if I tested negative, I'm like, okay, well, I can go to this event. But then when I actually got COVID, I didn't test positive until 3 days after I'd shown symptoms. So can you just talk about, what good, or what is the efficacy or the purpose of the tests, and how reliable are the home tests, and how we should be utilizing them to dictate or guide us in what events we might be going to that night.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great example of the limitations of testing. So we try to say, if you can wait until at least 2 days into your symptoms, that's kind of a good window to test, because your test is more likely to pick up the virus and show a positive. If you actually read the fine print, if you're using a home test and you test negative, you're actually supposed to repeat the test in 24 hours. That's potentially burning a lot of tests. But what you're pointing out, Commissioner, is exactly what the conundrum is with endorsing testing. I think it is a decent risk reduction strategy. It is not fail-safe because of the limitations you point out. So for someone who really is feeling unwell who tests negative, I would say, please stay home because you're sick. General public health guidance. On the other hand, if when you actually you think like, oh, I really think this is COVID. I've been around someone with COVID. Now I feel sick, but my test is negative. I would say it's probably COVID. Continue to test, or just follow the recommendations, assuming you have COVID, which would be home for 9 days. Home for 5 days if you're feeling better. Mask days 6 to 10.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Dr. Vines. And then I just find it interesting. So in Korea, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but they still require masking. And of course, different governments have different guidelines. But can you speak? I mean, I haven't looked at their data or other countries' data. Is that just an independent call by that government, or do you think that other countries are having higher rates than we are?
That's a really interesting question. There's a data component in there. I have not scanned, the experience of other countries recently, and in general, the United States tends to be an outlier. So it tends to be hard to compare our experience to other countries. I think we start to encounter cultural philosophies around the acceptability and the role of masking and service to, the collective community experience of disease transmission. When the Centers for Disease Control distinctly moved away from sort of the public health handing down restrictions and advice to a much more tailored approach to COVID-19, I think that reflects sort of where many people are in this country as far as what they can tolerate being handed to them from government, just to be honest.
No, that makes sense. There's some also, cultural differences. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. And Chantel, welcome. I hope you enjoy being here at the county. You're joining an amazing team, and hope you enjoy being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today. We do not have a board meeting on Thursday, so we will be back next week. We're adjourned.
Thank you.